So what I'm going to work on today is the exercise that we did today in class, and I'm going to try to run through it as comprehensively and simply as possible. And so I'm going to do it primarily in Rhino, but there are parts that are easier to do in Grasshopper. So there'll be some moments of Grasshopper. I'll also do a side tutorial about how to explain how to do the exercise in Grasshopper as well. And so the first thing we need to do this is to actually get I'm going to show you how to insert a picture. So we start by selecting the top viewport. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert this page. Now the exercise we're doing is from William's book for grading for drainage. And we're basically going to drag and drop that JPEG in there. And we're going to call it a picture. I'm going to press apply. It's there, and we'll just make it big enough because we're rescaling. I'm going to create a new layer called image. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to then use the object properties to then change that to image so that that's on that layer. Now, what we need to do is we need to scale it, and what a surprise, the command for that is scale. And so to do that, what I'm going to do is then use as a base point. It's like AutoCAD in that respect. We click in here, and then we go to here, and that's asking for the first reference point. It's called a reference point because of the fact that it's really saying that length is the length we care about. What is that length going to be? And so we know that it's for this platform, it's 30. I press enter, and now this is roughly that size. Now, it doesn't matter hugely, actually. So I'm now going to draw another layer, create another layer that I'm going to call platform. And then I'm going to then make that current, which I do by moving the dot to it or putting the tick next to it. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to draw a rectangle. Now, I clicked on the rectangle command. I can also type rectangle. If I sort of zoom in and go to here, it uses the syntax from AutoCAD, which is to use the at, like in the email at, as a way to describe a relative dimension. So if I go at 30, 30, I get this rectangle. And so you can see that Williams's book it's a little bit distorted. And so that image is a bit distorted. That's also because, his book has been photocopied and scanned, printed and rescanned. And so it's just a bit distorted. It doesn't really matter if that's not exact, but it does sort of matter a little bit. So now that I've got that platform, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, now I'm going to trace the contours. So, I'm going to create a layer called contours and, make it current. And so then I'm going to use this curve option that's called curve interpolate points. And I'm just going to click my way. I'm going to make sure I've got ortho turned off. I'm going to click on my way through and trace those, just making my way through as I go. Again, it's not entirely about absolute accuracy to this. It's just a way to get the base drawing in here. And so so as I'm going here, I'm really, what I'm doing is I'm really just tracing those points. And so I'll do another one, just keeping going here. And I'm doing the same here. I'm just making my way through. It's the fourth time I've done this in the last 2 days. Okay, moving my way along, wandering with the contours. So there's my contours. Now I've got those two things. I can then turn off the image And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move into 3D. And so I can see these things here. Well, actually, I need the contours still, because what we need to do is we need to move up the geometry. And so if I now turn that image on again, it's worth noting that the top one is 28 and then it's going down. So as usual, like previous, I click on here and type in 28 and it pops up. So I know I'm going down. 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, and 19. So that's the contours. And, I can also, obviously, I can always use this to sort of, these other windows to see, make sure they're all set up. And now I need to then make the platform and bring that to the right level. Now, if we go back to Williams again and we look at what it says, he's got an interesting thing happening here, which is he says in his instructions, which are above, is that he says HAB is 25.2, edge CD is 24.9. That's AB. And so what I do is I can actually click on this, pardon me, on this line here, and it's 25.2. And so what I can do is I can click on it. And if I click on those curves, and if you can't see those points on the end, you can use the edit points on, but I click on one and then I press shift and click on another. And that now you'll see the arrow moves to the middle, and that means that all of that edge is selected. And I think I can go and click here, and if I look up above it, so we can try to check again, 25.2. So I go 25.2, enter. And then you can see that at the bottom, I also have another one. And so I then have to set the bottom. This is what's called a crossfall. So I go there, press shift again, go there, and then I'm clicking here. And what I'm doing now is I'm choosing the other one, which is 24.9. So now you can see, if we're looking here, that that's actually a sloping platform, which is what we want. Now, we might start differently to how we did in class. I'm going to turn the images layer off, is that we might make our surface topography first. And so I'm going to create another layer called points and make it current. And as we did previously in last week, what we do is we use a command called extract points. And we basically are selecting all those contours, pressing enter, and we get all of those vertex points that we had before. Now what I do is I'm going to create another new layer, and I'm going to call it topo surface, and make that current. And so then what I can do is I can use the command patch, and what I'm doing is then I'm selecting all of these points. I'm not selecting the lines. I'm actually going to turn the contours off. So I just got the points. I'm also going to turn the platform off. We don't need it. So what I'm doing is, now the topo surface is selected, I'm choosing this command patch, and I'm selecting those things. And you'll see it gives me a lot of options here. And that's about how fine the mesh is. So it's 20 by 20, and if you can play with it to get it really tight. And I'm going to sort of let it interpolate it as it is, because it doesn't matter right now a huge amount for me. So I now have that mesh and the points layer. And so if I turn off the points, I'm also going to now go back to working on the platform. So I turn the platform on, and then I'm going to make the platform current, and I'm going to turn the topo surface off as well, because we'll come back to that. I'm going to create a layer now that I'm going to call working. So this is where we need to always make sure that we don't accidentally delete things. And so I'm going to copy this object here to here. So I've now got 2 copies. Now we know that I've got 2 copies because when I click on it, it tells me which one do you want to choose because they're on top of each other. I'll choose one of them, doesn't matter which one it is. And then I'm going to basically choose to say, move it to working. So now I can turn the platform off, make the working current, turn the platform off, and I've got this here. And so if we look at the example that Williams provides, he's got in there some things that he talks about. And so one of those things is, and if we go to images, I'm going to change the brief slightly. So if we go to images, one of the things he talks about is this idea that the drainage channel is to be a minimum of 5 meters from the platform edge. So what that means is that really what we're doing is we're offsetting that platform. Now, the platform, it's all joined together. We don't need all of it. We really only need the back, because if we go back to what this looks like, it really means that we've got water falling down both sides like this and the swale going down both sides. So we're really trying to work from the midpoint of a line that's offset. So if I explode this line, then what I can do is I can choose that and I explode it. And then what I'm doing is I'm offsetting this line like that. And so I've now got this offset line. And what I can do is I can turn my snap on and I can say, oops, not good snap. I can talk about, and I've got the snap down here and I can choose midpoint. And then what I can do is I can draw a line from the midpoint of here to the midpoint of here. And so that just means that what I'm doing is I'm really going to, that's just a line for me to trim against. So I'm trimming, I'm using that as the cutting edge, and then I'm trimming this side off. And now I've got a central point here, which is related to that back line. So, you know, one of the things I've learned through doing this assignment is we need to have quite a bit of space to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create quite a large cutting plane. So this is a plane which is really setting up the angle of the the swale base is going to be. So if I offset this by, you know, and I type in this, because it's actually going to be a 1 in 50 slope, which is what he specifies. I go 50, and then I offset it there. And I also want to offset it, this on the other side, I want to offset it by 10. In fact, I want to offset it by more. I'm going to offset it by 20. I'm actually going to move that over. No, that's too much. I'm going to offset it by 10. And I'll move it across to here. And then I'm also going to offset this side by 10 across to here. So now what I'm doing is I'm using the fillet command, and I'm going and filleting. One of the things when I do fillet is I have to realize that there is a radius. So I'm going to take the radius out and make it 0. So now when I fillet, it should work. Yes, it does. Fillet those ones, fillet those ones, and fillet those ones. Now this is where the line of the actual swale is going to be, but it almost doesn't matter a huge amount. Now at the same time, if we look at it, we see this is elevated up above here. And so one of the things that Williams talks about is the idea that the slopes are at 1:50. And so that means that because this distance here is 5 meters, that that the side slopes are at 1:5. I'm not actually going to make it that way. I'm going to make the side slopes at 1:3. So it's important to remember that, because I'm different from William. All of the embankments are at 1:3. So therefore, what that means is that I need to actually calculate what 5 meters is 1:3. So if we do that, we're going to actually I've created a difficult situation for myself there. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it 1:3. And so if we use the DLG calculation, then we know that I'm trying to work out what the difference is. And so, you know, this is where, ironically, it's a funny thing to do, but this is almost the easiest way to do it. So, you know, I'm actually going to move into Grasshopper for a second, perish the thought. And so I'm actually we're going to be in Grasshopper a bit. And one of the things that Grasshopper does is it's also just like a calculator. And so I can actually just use a calculator here. So I'm going to create a note for myself and so what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to, I'm going to start by creating a calculator. And so, yeah, here's the note. And so the note is this. So that if it's D, L, and G, so I'm just using this as a note. So, whoops. So D, then if we know the D, we don't know D, because D is the difference in elevation. And so what we know is we don't know D. This is the way I always approach it. L is the length, and we know the length because Williams wants 5. And we know the grade. The grade is actually 1 in 3. Now this is where we're in an interesting space here, because in the first instance, DLG wants to be in decimal. And so to do that, what we do is we can create a calculator really quickly. And so I can create a calculator where I go 1. It's just to show you how easy this is actually. You know, I can go 1, and then I can do a grade calculator where I actually go, so I'm going to make it so that this is actually centered, because that really annoys me. So I go 1, and so then, why is it like that? I want it to be centered. Anyway, so I go 1, and then I can say I want to divide it. So I type divide or division, and I can say 1 divided by. And now I'm going to create actually another thing. So I'm going to go 1 to 100. And so this is now my grade calculator, my decimal grade calculator. And so because it's 1:3, you notice that syntax again, right? 1 in the, you know, smaller than whatever the number might be, gives you a slider of that value 1 to 100. And so then what I'm doing is I'm going over here, and I'm really, I'm basically making that 3. And so then I can put a panel on the other side, and we can see what that percentage is. That's 1:1, but 1:3 becomes 0.33. So it's not a surprise, right? We knew what that was going to be. So that's showing you how Grasshopper can just be a calculator. It doesn't even have to be anything exciting. And so that's now my thing. And so if I remember that when I'm after D, it's DLG. So we know what L is. And so what I can do now is I can go, L is 5. So when we get DLG, it's actually D over L and G. So to find those two, we get the length divided by the grade. And so what I do is I divide the curve, not divide the curve, I do division. And so I'm getting 5, no, sorry, it's multiply, because they're next to each other. The D and L and G means that that's multiplication. And so I'm going multiplication, multiply, and I'm saying, I'm basically getting that in there. So I'm saying there's the decimal. And so what I've got there is then I've got a got a panel here again to plug into, and I can see that this answer does not look right to me. Because if it's 1:3, oh no, that is actually right. It is right. And so what I've got is I've got 1.66. And so what I'm going to do is I'm because it's steeper, of course, than 1:5. I'm then going to then say, let's move this platform down, you know, 1.66. So I'm going to move, first of all, I'm going to join this thing together. So that's now one thing. I can then move it down by, you know, in actual fact, often they use 3 decimal places. So I can go 1.666, and I say negative, oh no, yeah, 1.66, is that what I got here? Yeah, I can say negative, and it will just, that will make it a negative in the Z direction. So if I look here, I should see that that's down there. And so now I've got that like that. And of course, it's 1:50. And so now what I'm trying to do is I want to move these ends down 1 meter. And so I'm going to select that point again and select that point like I did, and I'm going to go -1. And so that just means that now if we look at it from the side, and let's zoom in and see what we see, you'll see that in actual fact, that plane is down that side there. And so that side is now angling down. That's the grade plane, I call it. And so the first thing I do is now that I've got that, is that I'm going to make a surface. I'm going to make a planar surface. And I'm going to choose that and enter. So that's a planar surface. So that's going to be what we're going to edit against. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, actually going to delete that there actually, because it's already inherently in there in this way this plane is constructed. And so what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to do the next operation, which is about finding the intersection between these two things. And so because, you know, Williams was talking about his banks on this geometry being 1 in 5, I'm actually going to obviously go back to changing it to our 1 in 3, because that's what we've been working with. And so if we do that and I want to go down make sure I go down enough, what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset this to go down 2 meters, which means that I offset it 2 times 3, which is 6 meters. So I'm going to offset it 6 meters. Well, first of all, I'm actually going to join it back together again to make one thing. And then I'm going to offset it, and I'm going to offset it by, you know, maybe I'll make it 3 meters. So 3 6s there. I'm going to offset it by, if I go 3 meters vertically, it would be 9. And so let's offset it 9 actually. So it's there. Now, because of this, obviously this is where we're looking at. So I've offset it 9 and 1 is 3, means that it's actually -3. So that's, again, this is like the first exercise where we created a solid for this process, and we're going to do the same thing again. And so now what I do is I create a loft, and I get this, and I get this, and then I've now created a loft, which is like that solid object there. So it's called a loft. And so I now have these two, and so what I'm going to call these is I'm just going to call these forms. And that way, if I accidentally, I don't want to, you know, I want to put them on that layer and call it forms because of the fact that I want to be able to turn them off and on. I don't want to keep working with them all the time. So now that I've got those, we then try to find the resultant line. And so the way we do this is that we use Grasshopper again. Now, I can keep these. They're not linked to my drawing, so they don't matter. So I can move them out of the way. What I do is I use what's known as a B-rep, and I type in B-rep, and I choose, and I right-click on it, and I say set one B-rep, and let's make that one this one. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to group it by pressing Control-G, and then I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to call this back grade plane. And then I'm going to do the same again, B-rep, and I'm going to go right click on this, set one BREP, set this one, and then I'm going to call this, platform batter. Batter is a term that means, in a way, the angle. So I'm just by calling it a batter or batters, platform batters. So there's a command here in intersect, which is called BREP to BREP. And when it calls it physical here, what that means is that it's literally saying when two things intersect, where do they intersect? And it draws a line. It's a physical thing because they're literally two physical forms. So when I choose BREP and BREP, it means because I've got two BREPs, it's doing a collision between one BREP or intersection event between two of them. So I plug them into each other, and what you'll see is we now have that green line over there, which indicates where that is occurring. And so what I'm doing now is I'm going to create another layer on the Rhino side, and I'm going to call that, in fact, I'm going to call that layer swale invert, because that's the bottom level of this bottom of the swale. And I'm going to make that current. I'm not going to make it current. I'm going to then bake it. So if I press bake, it'll bake that component, which means it'll then put it into onto that layer. So I go okay, and then you'll see that when I click on it, there it is. Now I'm now going to turn off all of these elements here, and so I'm going to turn the preview off, turn off the preview, turn off the preview here, so that we don't see anything on the Grasshopper side really. And so now you can see that we've got that resultant line. Now, if I click on it, we don't need all of it because it's actually only working on that plane. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to explode it, and then I'm going to delete this one. Now, you can see that I've got these geometries here. And so what I'm going to do is we have to be really careful at this point. So now we have one plane. And the main thing we're ultimately going to do, and I'm just drawing this to show you that ultimately we're going to be drawing a next line that's at right angles in here to where that is. And so what we need to do is we need to find a way of making that right angled line accurate. Now, because if we look at this curve here, we see that it's actually angled. Let's have a look at it. You'll see that that curve there is actually, it's an angled curve, right? And so we want to make sure that we working with a flat curve, because the right angle of an angled curve is another angled line. And it may be correct actually, but I'm not doing it that way. I'm doing it this way. So it might be that, how would you even get it? I mean, I think that this is where, no, because if we offset it that, we're only getting that plane. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create another surface, because I'm going to use a command that's called the project command. So I'm creating another surface now, and I'm actually going to make it a planar curve. And so it's another surface at the base. It's not a surface that we're going to model from. It's a surface that we're using for another purpose, which is to create what's called a projection. And a projection is literally, imagine if you had a three-dimensional object. If I have this here, and imagine I had a data projector that casts a shadow, that would give me a flat version of this three-dimensional thing. So it's called project. And it's so that we get a flat version of that line. And so what I'm going to do is then I'm going to choose to project, and it says, what do you want to project? And as usual, like AutoCAD, always read these side notes. So I select that one, and then when it says, what surfaces do you want to project it onto? I choose this one. And so now if we look at what's happened here, you'll see that at this lower level, there is actually that lower line. And in plan, we can see it doesn't exist. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete that curve, and I'm going to delete that surface because it was only ever a construction surface. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be paying very careful attention now to the fact that I'm working on this lower object. And so because it's 1:50, I'm going to kind of, I'm going to make it much longer than it probably needs to be. And so it's actually, I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it 100. In actual fact, it doesn't need to be that. I mean, I'm going to do it I'm going to do it at 1 is to 100 to allow. I'm going to do it 102 meters down so that it's actually giving us enough length to work with. So I'm going to offset this lower line here, and I'm actually going to set it to 100. So I type in 100, enter, and of course now there it is. And so I'm going to start by also then drawing a line from here to here, another one from here to here. So remember, I'm working on that lower plane. I'm going to offset by 10 meters this side over here. Maybe I'll even offset more. So maybe I'm going to offset, whoops, I'm going to offset 20 meters. And so, you can see that that's there. I'm then going to use the fillet command again. I'm going to use the fillet command, and I'm also going to join these things together. Whoops, I'm trying to join them. They're all joined, there we go. So what I'm also going to do now is I'm actually going to turn off these form layers. And I'm also going to, I've turned off those form layers, and I'm also going to create another layer that I'm just going to call temp. I often use a temp layer, and I'm going to actually also turn on, I'm going to move all of these, I'm going to move these things together, and I'm going to put them onto that layer called temp, which I'm going to freeze, because I just want to have the geometry that I'm working with. I don't want to have anything else, because this next stage can get confusing. So similarly, I'm going to move this one. And so now what I should have is what did I lose? How did I lose let me undo that for a second. I somehow lost some geometry there. How exactly did I lose my projected line? So there should be another line up there. Let me just keep, there it is. No, that's not it. What point did yes, there it is. Is it? Let's have a look. There's an easy way to check here. That's the lower one. So there's actually a point at which I lost my upper line, and that's a problem. Yeah, so there it is, still there. It's in there. Did I lose it? At what point did I lose that line? There it is. Now there it is in the upper layer, right? So this is probably because there's actually a variable here. So I choose project, and I want to project. You see it has a variable called delete input. Don't delete the input. I need it. So that's the one, and then I'm projecting it onto there. And so, yeah, so now I've got it projected. And so you can see that hopefully there, yes, there's the one that I want to keep. Now that should be on swale invert. That's good. That's where we want it. Now I'll go through that whole process again of offsetting, etc. And I'm going to offset that one that was projected by 100. And then I'm going to, as I did before, I'm going to delete this plane because I don't really need it. It was only a construction plane. So then I'm recreating steps here. So I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. I fillet it. Go back in again, I fillet that layer as well. Is my top line still there? Yes, it is. And so now I've got that, I'm going to join it. So that's now joined. And so then, okay, now we're back where we were. So these objects here, I'm going to, you know, turn off those forms, as I called them. And I'm just going to move all of that other geometry apart from, I'm going to move that back onto, you know, I lost that. I somehow didn't have that layer called temp. So I'm going to then freeze it, and I'm going to move some of this working geometry onto temp because I really don't need to see it all right now. I do need that one, and I need that one underneath. That one I don't. I mean, let's move that onto temp anyway. So now it's better because now we have this here. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move this object. And you see how I've kept that original line. It's because the end point of that line is actually, and I need to make sure that this is where snap is really important. So turn off everything except the end point. So then what I'm doing is I'm moving this one from this one to that one. And so that's really important that you know that you're snapping to that one. And so because of the fact that I made this 100 and it's 1 in 50, I'm also going to do, as I did before, I'm going to move this down -2 because it was 100 meters long at a 1:50 gives a 2 meter change in level. And so now I have that there. Then what I'm going to do is something similar to, you see that in there is actually that, again, that is the original line. And so what we're now going to do is that I'm going to then make that a plane again, make that a planar surface like I did before. And so that's now another piece of geometry. And so what I can do is, you know, this situation is that I can now, you know, I had this here before, I can now create another B-rep. And so B-rep. And so the B-rep this time is actually, if I set one B-rep, it's that plane I've just created. So obviously I want to group that to say and name it like I did before, and we'll call that the side grade plane. And so for the side grade plane, what I'm doing now is I'm going to, I'm basically now going to do the same thing again. So go to physical, B-rep to B-rep. This time, again, what I'm looking for is platform batters and the side plane. So if we look at what this means, you'll see that we end up with something like that. Now let's now turn on the those forms, and you see how we end up with a situation like this, where that's now how this thing intersects, how this plane intersects with the solid of the platform. So like as I did previously, I'm now going to bake this one, and I'm going to bake it to the layer that's called swale invert. And so I'm also now, once that's done, I'm going to turn off the preview because I'm not doing a full Grasshopper thing here. I'm just actually utilizing it as I go along. So turn that off. And so obviously this is another one of my, forms. And so I put that onto the forms layer. And if we turn off the forms, that's interesting. And we know that what's happening with this one here. We know that those ones also go onto this temp layer. And you see we have these three. Now, if we look at it, you can see they're going this way. I'm going to explode this one here. Also, because the return we're not going to need, because when it's on the side of the slope, like if I turn the contours on and I turn the platform on, you'll see that in a way it's continuing down the slope. We wouldn't want to return it because we're going to make it into a hole. And in actual fact, we need it to go further than that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that guy now. And you see I've now got these two lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to join them. So I'm going to join this one and this one. And so now what I have is what I essentially have is my swale that is running its way along. And so the thing that's important about this is that we are getting this is the bottom of the swale that's going around. So it's really important actually, because it sets up how the rest of the topography is going to work. And so at this point, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to start by mirroring it. So I've put Grasshopper away for a little bit, even though mirroring is really easy. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw a line. I'm going to turn midpoint on again. And I'm also going to turn ortho on again. And I'm going to draw a line where I'm going from, making it, I want to actually snap to the midpoint of the platform. And then I move up and it should be, and it is, there it is. So what I'm now going to do is I'm actually also going to start to construct the embankment at the back all the way around. So we're working in this abstract way at the moment. And so part of that means it's 1:3. We saw when I tried this before that some of these batters can be really big. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to offset this. I want to move this up. I want to give myself lots of space. So I'm going to move this up 10, which means that I'm going to offset. 30 is going to lose it off the page. I'm actually going to offset it. I want 5 meters, 5 threes. I'm going to offset it 15 meters. So that means then that if it's 1:3, then 5 meters vertically is, am I right here? So 1:3, I want to go up 5 meters. 5 times 3 is 15. And so what I do is I'm going to offset this one here, 15 meters up to here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm also then going to move that up to 5 meters. Now, if we look, we can see how this is almost too low. Not quite. I think it's going to just get above the topography. And so, in that situation, what we're going to do also is we're going to, I could even do something like create more contours to show this exercise. And so this is where I'm now going to, I'm going to draw a line from here, from the midpoint of this one here, being really careful, and I'm going to move up. And then I'm actually going to trim this guy against that edge. I'm trimming that bit off. So again, this command, this is all about understanding the syntax, which is you get the command running before you do anything. It's the AutoCAD way of thinking. And so it's something which I think is really important for us to know about. So we've got that there now. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to actually now to mirror those two there. And, you know, a mirror line can be operating in a number of ways. So that's now the mirror line. You can see straight away that there is something else, there is something missing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to extend the topography for the convenience of doing this thing. So I'm going to say offset, and I'm going to offset that. And I'm going to click on the distance button to measure the distance between these two. And then I'm going to go up there. Now I'm also going to change this one to the layer called contours. And I'm going to remember that if I turn this drawing on, so this is also what I'm telling you you need to do if you want to, if you're kind of running out of space. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to make that, since that's 28, I'm going to move that one to 29. So I'll turn that off, and I'm going to make that one there is, it's actually already at level with the last one. So I'm just going to put it 1 meter higher. And so then we have enough topography to work with in this operation. I'm also going to have to redo my points. And so I'm going to turn, this is now on the layer called working. This one here is on the layer called swale invert. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, first of all, let's work with these things. And I'm going to join this one and this one. And I'm going to join this one and this one. And so you can see they're 2 lines. And so if I use the command edge surf, I can then get those two to be surfaces. And if we look here, we can see how that's working. And I mean, some of them are pretty close to not being to almost being under the ground. And I mean, you know, this is where you know, potentially I have to move this even further, but we'll see what happens here. And so, you know, and so if we're going to look at this example again, what we'll do is we'll turn off those, because these forms here, I'm going to actually create these, and I'm going to have this layer that I'm going to call banks. And I'm then going to put that surface there on the layer called banks. And now I'm going to turn off that layer so I can't see it. And of course, that's my swale invert. This one here is on working, that's okay. Let's move it onto temp. So it disappears. And, you know, I'm also going to now focus on, I'm going to turn on those layers of points. I'm going to turn off, I'm actually going to make points current. And I'm going to also then turn off everything else apart from points, because I need to regenerate those points. So it's just nothing apart from points. Let's delete those points. And now what we can do is we can, you know, we can basically create the points again. So I'll turn contours on. I'll keep points as current. I'll use the command extract points. And then I'll choose this again, press enter. There's the points. You know, we also had that topo surface. I'm going to delete that topo surface. And now I'm going to turn off the contours again, and we'll use that command patch again. We'll get those points. We press enter. We're just going to accept the preview for now. There it is. And then what we're looking at really is that surface. So if I move topo surface and I make it current, and then I turn off points, we see, whoops, the surface is, that's because the surface is still on there. So I move it to topo surface, and then I turn off points. Here it is. Now the big moment of whatever is this. If I turn banks on and then I shade it, this is where, you know, we are seeing here the fact that this embankment is actually not high enough. And so this is a situation that you're going to arise with. And so this is where I've been playing around. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to recreate that embankment and make it higher. And so I'm going to start by I'll turn that off from shaded. I'm going to turn it onto wireframe again. I'm actually going to delete that object. I'm going to turn temp on. If you remember, there's a lot of geometry in temp. I'm going to turn off topo surface. I'm going to make working, put working on, make it current. And I'm going to turn off topo surface. And if you remember, I've got that geometry up there, which is the top one. And so that wasn't far enough away. And so what we need to do is actually offset it further. Now, I can't remember what it was offset originally. So I'm going to put on the swale invert again, and I'm just going to measure the distance, and I'm going to put on perpendicular. And so I go distance, and I go from midpoint to perpendicular, and it tells me that it's because there's an angling to it, but it's 15 meters. So what I really need to do is I need to really go to 18 meters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that one, and I'm going to offset this one 18 meters. And now that I've got that, I'm then also going to move it by 6 meters. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a rule surf. Oops, an edge surf, pardon me. And I'm going to go in here. Now let's just do our quick test and see how that looks in terms of shaded. And yeah, now is it all coming through? Man, there's still a little bit along the top there. Gee. So I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to undo, and I'm actually going to undo again. So I went to 18, now I'm going to go 21. This is a moment where Grasshopper would really help. So I go to offset 21, oops, offset 21. I choose this curve, offset it to there, And now I move it up to 7, because it was 21, 3 7s are 21. So I go to 7, move it up. Again, I do an edge surf, and I go from there to there, enter. There's my surface. Let's turn on that topo surface again. Are we out? We're out. Okay, finally, we're out. So as you can see, I'm just showing you a process that I'm going through right now to make sure that my method works, because ultimately I'm generalizing all the size of this. So I'm not actually working out numbers. I'm trial and error to get to this point where we've pushed it out. And you see that I had to increase the size of the site a bit and increase the scale of the solid that we're extracting from. And so what we're now basically doing is that we've got that solid there, which is the outside edge of the batters. Now we know that the extent of it is correct. And so, this object now is on layer working. Let's move it onto layer banks, because that's one of the ones we're working with. So what I also want to do is let's now also turn on layer forms, and we can see a few other things here, which is about how we can see in this situation how how that swale is also, it's kind of running out at a certain point here as well. And so what we're doing is we're in a way also trying to we're going to cut out a few pieces. And so we've got this point where this embankment is also meeting the side of this, the side of this existing topography. And so we've also, we know that we'll need to remove some of this stuff on the inside. We also we know that we need to trim a few things. And so part of this process is now a kind of almost like a trial and error process. And so I'm gonna quickly, look at a few things. Now this here, this layer is called forms. I'm actually going to create a thing where I'm going to call it platform fill. And now I'm going to move this platform here, and I'm going to move that onto the layer called platform fill. And so what I can do now is I can also turn off forms, and we can see what we've got. Now, what's interesting, if we look at this, I can also turn off temp, is we can see a few things here. One is that in actual fact, we're going to need to extend the scale of, if I'm looking at this again, it's fine at the back, but when I look at the front here, we can see that this object is actually not right. And so this means that we have to reconstruct again the same way that we did from the upside. We have to reconstruct from the downside to get the solid to meet and extend all the way through. And so we're going to do a similar sort of process. We're going to delete this, remembering that this is also at 1:3. We're going to delete that. We're going to turn on, I'm going to go back to turning on the wireframe at this point. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn on the platform again. And so what I'm going to do this time is I'm actually, if it's 1:3, I'm going to go to make it 5 meters down. So it's a much more substantial thing. So to make it 5 3s are 15. So if I offset this here, and then I say, oops, offset this one, and I say on offset 15, no, 5 3s are 15. If I to 5, yes, 15. Offset at 15. And then what I'm doing is I'm literally also moving it down by -3 5s are 15. No, 3 is not enough. Sorry, getting a bit tired here. So if I want it to go down 5 meters, that's 5. If I want it to go down 5 meters and it's 3 meters, so 1:3, I want it to go down 5. 5 times 3 is 15, right? Am I going mad here? This is where a Grasshopper would really help me at this point. Offset this one. Let's do it 15. We'll see what that looks like. We'll move it down. Actually, that's -3. I feel like that's what we had before. Let's do, let me get this book out. Let me get this book out for a second and write something down, because I think my brain is partially fried. So let me actually work a process here. So if it's 1:3, then I want to go 5. I'm saying 5 times, that's right, isn't it? 5 3s are 15. Find it fun. 5 times 3 is 15. Yes. So in actual fact, this is the wrong. I moved it down the wrong amount. So let's delete that again. I'm going to offset this again, and we're going to offset it this time 15. Okay, that's right. But now we're also going to move it. Whoops, we're going to move it 5. Oh no, that's gone up. -5. Okay, now let's do again our edge surf, or our edge surf. In fact, loft is more reliable. So let's, for these some of these forms, so let's do that. So let's now have a look here. Let's now show this as shaded and see, yeah, okay, so are we still above there? We are a little bit. So in that case, let's go the next way and let's go 6. So 6 times 3, 3 6 is 18. So let's do it the other way. Let's go 18. Or go 7 and 21. Let's just overstate it. That's some of the things that is useful to do. So let's do that. Let's go 21. So I'm going to offset 21. And now I'm going to move it down 7, -7. And then I'm going to do a loft. And the loft will then be a solid. Okay, now we're in business. Hallelujah. And so, you know, as you can see, the platform is actually really now embedded. The back bank is embedded. We can also see, what interestingly here, that we are actually completely, you know, our swale is in a way lost in the back here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an operation where we're going to find some outlines, is essentially what we're going to do. And we're going to then probably use those outlines to trim the various components against. This is the process we're going to go through. And so we're going to use a bit of Grasshopper again. I hope you don't mind. You know, so this time we're also going to do we're going to create a B-rep. And with the B-rep, what we're going to do is we're going to set one B-rep, and I'm going to set that one there, and I'm going to call it, group it and call it topo surface. One other thing I'm also going to do is you'll see up here, because it's shown like this, it's because I actually recreated that solid. So I'm also going to set one B-rep, and I'm going to make it this, oops, no, that surface. And so then we should be able to, if I just click on there, yeah, that's now that base. So if you see I've got that little green thing, it means that it's showing you which things are which in the model when you do that. It's quite nifty. And so, you know, and so what we're now doing is we've got a lot of, everything's very exaggerated. And so one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to do another BBX, which is basically, I can get to this by typing B-rep, and you see it says B-rep to B-rep. And so what I can do then, I'm going to do another one. I'm going to go for, this time I'm going to move that out of the way because I don't need that, but I'm going to do one between topo surface and the platform batters. And so you see how what we've got when we get that like that is that we've actually got, this is the extent of what the that fill would be on that site. That's how it works. And so that's one. So let's do another one now. What is this? I don't think I've got, if I click on this guy, I don't think I've actually got a, that's platform batters, that's side grade. You know, in actual fact, what did I call the layer for the banks? I'm now going to create another B-rep called banks. Set one B-rep, and this time I'm going for this guy. So that's called banks. Again, this is a very simple Grasshopper we're doing here, nothing radical. And so all I'm trying to do is to see where things go. So now if I go to, again, B-rep to B-rep, what I can do is I can say topo surface to banks, and you can see that's the extent of the banks. So what I'm doing now is I'm really going to start to use those intersection events as a way of editing the mesh. And I'm basically going to edit everything else with this line I'm creating now. So if you can see, there's one part of it, and there's another part of it. And so what it means is that between those two, that's the extent of cut and fill, right? That's the extent of where things are happening. Now, we've still got the swale in the back, etc. But in terms of the topography and this sort of thing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go here and create a new layer, and I'm going to call it works boundary. It's probably a very utilitarian sort of sounding name. And so for works boundary, what that means is that I'm actually going to bake that one onto works boundary, and I'm going to bake that one onto works boundary. And so now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to go through and turn off all this Grasshopper stuff. Or not turn it off, but turn off the preview, because I've now baked all the things that I need. And so then that's now there. And so move Grasshopper away again. And so in this situation, I've now got this topographic situation. I've got the outline. So let's keep works boundary as our dominant one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to begin turning other things off. We're going to turn forms. We're going to turn forms off. We're going to turn swale envelope. We're going to turn banks off. We're going to actually turn off pretty much everything except for topo surface. Well, first of all, I want to keep these ones together. I know that's a really weird looking thing, right? That's how the slope meets. That's the result where everything meets. And so what I'm going to do is I introduce you to this concept of project before. What I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to project all this geometry again. And that's because I'm going to make it into a flat thing. And I'm actually going to create a new layer as well. I'm going to create a new layer. And I mean, you can also, we can also in this program, we can create sub layers. So I can also call, when it comes to works boundary, I can also create a layer called projected, and I can actually then put that inside that. And you can see now projected is there. That's so we can nest layers. I didn't talk about that before, but that's something you can do. So what if I do is I create a surface again, I create a patch, and I go, here is the patch. No, not the patch. Planar. Creating a planar surface here. Click on it, enter, there it is. And so what I'm now going to do is I'm going to make works boundary projected the current, and I'm going to now project this geometry all onto this geometry. And so you'll see now there is a copy of the two. Now, I can't actually turn off, this is the annoying part, I can't really turn off that upper one because I put it onto another layer. But I could create another layer here, which is called 3D. And basically what I could do then is move all of that onto 3D. And that way I can then turn off 3D. And if I wanted to, when I turn off works boundary, everything that's underneath that family of layers disappears as well. So now I've got this, what I'm doing is I'm actually going to trim it because it's all flat now. So because it's all coplanar is a key term. Coplanar is, everything's easy when it's coplanar. When things are actually looking together, it's coplanar is easier. So if I go to trim now, what I can do is I can trim that off there like that. And so that's now the overall extent of the works. Now, what's useful about this is that this is now a cutting volume. What I'm creating is a cutting volume. I'm going to get rid of this, get rid of that. So I now have this as a kind of cutting volume. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create another layer called extrusion. And then what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to extrude, just extrude curve. And I'm then, mental note, join it together first. Yep. So I'm now going to extrude, curve, not tapered, just extrude. Enter, and I'm now going to extrude it to a decent height. Now that's way too high probably. Like if I put on topo surface there, we're not even going to see it. But you see what I want to do now is I'm actually wanting to trim that topo surface. Now I want to keep copies of things. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm actually going to create another layer that's called, I'm going to call it trimmed. And I'm going to put that underneath topo surface since I'm now in this space where I'm real excited about doing this stuff. And I'm going to create a new sublayer and I'm going to call it patch, which is like the original. And so I'm going to get that, and I'm going to move that onto patch, and I'm going to copy this whole surface again from the endpoint to the endpoint. I'm going to get one of them, and I'm going to move it to trimmed, and then I'm going to turn off patch. Now the reason, as you know, I'm keeping items so that if I need to reverse this process. Now, if I do it in Grasshopper, I don't need to because I can bake at any point. So now what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to be optimistic. And if this doesn't work, I'm going to pause this and then fix it and get it right and come back. So what I'm doing is I'm going to trim. It wants the cutting object. Again, for those of you who've never used AutoCAD, read the prompt. That's the thing, read the prompt. That's what you want to be doing all the time, is reading the prompt. And so I'm now going to choose the cutting object, which is this. And then I'm going to click inside here. And so, yay, you did what I wanted, yay. And so that's now, that's still there. We're going to keep using that. And so that's now our, the extent of the cut and fill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off that layer. And now I'm going to start to work on some other things. I'm going to go to, we've got this one called platform fill. Did I do something to platform fill? Where's the rest of my friends? Banks. Okay, there's banks, right? And so now I can do a similar operation with banks. And so here I'm going to do the same thing, like let's not lose everything, right? So I'm going to create a sublayer here, and I'm going to call it, you know, I'm going to call it edge surf. And then I'm going to actually then, you know, create a new layer again, and I'm going to call it trimmed. And so I'm going to select this object here. I'm going to copy it from the same point as usual, a normal drill, get that poly surface, change it over to edge surface. Then I'm going to turn off the edge surface so that we've just got that. Now, as you can see, let's zoom in here and look around a second. So if we're looking around a second, you can see here how things are intersecting, and you really want everything to be intersecting in some sort of way. And so there's interesting points here as well, because you can see that point there, that's actually a point where something else is happening. Now, this is actually also the point where I need to work out for the swale, how things are happening. So I'm going to kind of play a little bit. Let's trim this and see whether or not that works. We can reverse, right? So let's now trim, and let's choose, it says cutting objects, which is basically the solid again. And then you always choose the stuff that's on the, in this situation, I'm choosing on the outside because this is going to trim it back to the shape of the topography, right? And so now hopefully we end up with the kind of the shape of the embankment. And so what I now have, let's now turn off the extrusion of the works boundary. Whoops. Let's make you know, trimmed here current, and let's turn off projected, which is really not, it was supposed to be called really. So then we have what that, you know, that's the, if we then turn on the topo surface, you can see how those banks are now meeting. Now, we've got this weird glitchy point here, and that's because we've got something else to trim. And so now we need to actually trim the platform against it. So we've got that there, and yay, so exciting. And so we can take out this, like I can delete that guy. We don't really need that one. That's not really real. We're imagining that. And so then what I can also do is I can delete that little guy because we don't really need that. And so then I've got those interior edges there. So now what I can do is I can actually work on the lower part. And so it's so exciting. So let's now turn off those banks for a second. Let's now actually turn on the, what did I call it? Did I call it platform fill, right? That's what I called it, didn't I? Or did I lose that as well? This is where it gets, is it on forms? No, that's not there. So let's work our way through a little bit. Temp, no. Where are you? Swale invert, no, that's the swale invert. That's the topo surface unpatched. That's the, interesting. Did I delete it? A good way to tell is if it's showing up here. Banks, you see, at some point or another, I deleted it. And so I need to go back and recreate it. Now, this is an easy thing to do, right? But I did it. So let's go in here again and create it again. Go back to platform, turn the platform on. Now, I think we ended up, I feel like I wrote it down, right? 28 actually. So now what I'm going to do is the same thing again, but this time I'm going to get a bit serious, like this whole banks, this whole platform thing. Like, let's actually just create a sub layer onto here now. It's like my layering went crazy, right? This is where the top, let's call it, is up there, and let's now move that and then move that onto the layer top. Let's now create another layer which we can call base. Now I'll put that underneath there. And so now what we'll do is I'm going to offset the same process again, right? Offset, geez, I must have done it pretty recently. So then what I'm doing again is I'm moving that down by -7. So somewhere along the way I did that. I probably trimmed it out of existence, right? So that's the base. Now let's create another layer that we'll call loft. And so now I'll make that current, and I'll basically create a loft between that one and that one. Yeah, there it is. And so now what I've got is that I've got a, I've got this here, and I've now got that lower thing. So let's now duplicate that layer. Whoops, it's just the option that says duplicate layer and objects. That's handy. And so I'm going to call it loft trimmed. I'm just going to call it trimmed. And so I'll make that current. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off that loft, and I'm going to go back to the works boundary projected here as before. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go through again, and it's interesting because now it's on the outside. And so what I really need here is really the line that's on the inside. So that, if you can, I suppose what I'm saying, just to make clear what I'm saying here, if we zoom out and we zoom into this thing, you'll see that we the top of this trimmed section is at the top of that bank. Whereas, does that get us, where does it get us? We actually need to trim this slightly differently, because if you look at this, you'll see that there is the line of the swale. Okay, so we need to create a different boundary here and a new volume to subtract from. That's okay, we can do that. And so what we're doing now is where I'm turning off that works volume, that projected thing. And I'm also going to turn off, I'm going to turn on the swale invert. I'm going to turn off, whoops, I'm going to turn off a lot of this other stuff. I'm going to turn off banks trimmed. I'm actually also going to turn off, now this guy, where are you on? What's your layer? Trimmed. I thought, no, that's because you're trimmed, platform trimmed. So what I'm now going to move on to is I'm still wanting to work on the platform. So that's going to be my main thing. And I'm going to create a sub layer, which I'm going to call, what do I want to call it? Outline or something. What have I called it in previous places? Projected? I can kind of call it that. That kind of is least consistent. So I'll do that there. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the trimmed. So we've just got that. And what I need to see is I need to also see projected. Yeah. And so you see how what we've got here is we've got that line and then that line. So we're kind of working on the outside, on the edge of it where it meets this thing. So what I can do is I can actually project this again. This is not a bad way to do it, right? So if we look at, I can see I've still got that works boundary projected. So I'll turn that off. That's interesting. Did I actually, no, projected is what I needed. You know what that's about? That's actually about, that's why we're in trouble here. I'm going to move extrusion over here, and I'm actually going to move that object onto extrusion, and then I'm going to turn off extrusion. Right, that's better. So here's our outline at the base. And so I'm going to also now project again. I'm going to set up another plane here, and I'm going to now project this over here, and I'm going to create a planar surface again. So now I'm going to project basically this curve onto this surface. So we'll see here that those two are now on the same level. Now, we don't need that, but what we do need to know about is that we're really, what are we working with here, and what are we not wanting to delete? That's projected. That's this line here. I think I can turn off on the banks. I can also, you know, what's that on? What layer is that on? That's just on layer banks. Let's change that onto trimmed. And so let's just turn trimmed on again and make sure that I've written wrong trimmed. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, a bit of layer confusion here. No, that's because I'm not, no, that is banks. So what's this one here? That's projected, right? That's on projected works boundary, yes. So let's go down to works boundary, and that's projected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it. You may as well copy it from here to here. It doesn't matter where it is, so long as the base point is correct. And I'm now going to move it to platform projected. And so if I look at it back here into platform projected, that's good. That's the layer I'm working on. And so then I've got also this guy down here, which is also on projected. Okay, good. Let's turn off the stuff I don't want to accidentally mess up. So the easiest way to do it is we can actually turn off banks completely. And so now what I can do is I can I can also, I can turn off the top. Interestingly, when I lost the base somehow in here, but we're on projected, that's okay. So that's the lower level there. This is let's not get rid of our swale invert, because that's really important. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim. I'm basically going to trim. So choose this. I'm actually going to choose everything. And then I'm going to trim that one out of there. I'm going to trim that out of there. So that now we have, oops, what is that one? That's fine, that can be lost now. So now if we join that together, oops, there's a little bit of funniness there. So if we join that together, and I also want to trim, yeah. So now I want to join all this together, join with that, and I've got that there. And so this is now the thing, and so I can call this, call this in the sort of same thing. I can call this extrusion. Right, and so if we've got trimmed, this is where we've got loft, like loft. Right, so we're now going to trimmed. We turn trimmed on, and then I'm going to make extrusion current, and I'm now going to extrude, not curve taper, just extrude. I'm going to extrude this one up, and I'm going to now move it through there. And so for this one, I'm now ready to trim out the bits that are not inside that. And in this way, what I'm getting is I'm actually getting the swale. So that's what I'm getting here, is the swale. And so if I then trim, I say that I'm going to trim the cutting objects is actually this solid. And then what I'm doing is I'm trimming all that out. Then I can also then sort of go back to make trimmed current and turn the extrusion off. And there I have that. Now, this here should be on the layer projected. So that's fine. Let's turn off projected as well. You see what I did there is I've actually affected the boundary of projected. I got lost between all my different versions, which is a bit of a problem, because that means that I've actually trimmed it out of the way. But let's see, we should be all right. So I can turn that projected off. So let's now put things on and see what we've got, shall we? Let's turn topo surface trimmed is there. Let's now turn banks trimmed. I froze that, so let's now banks trimmed. So let's now get in here and have a look, because I think we're there. Let me then get back to here. There is one thing missing still. So then that's our cut. And then what I can do now is I can also now make for the final thing, what I can do is I can go for platform, and on platform, I may as well do it on trimmed, and setting trimmed here. What I can also do is create a planar surface, and I can choose, I can actually turn the top on, and I can then say planar surface, and I can choose that top, and now I have that. And so as we can see now, what I have is I have all of that there. So that's now, we've now got the swale running around the back. It's falling in both directions. It's coming its way around. It's meeting the existing. And so what we're doing now is we have that thing. That's pretty exciting. It's not like it was the easiest thing to do in the world, but it's a process that we went through, and I'm hoping that you understand that process. So now I do Control 5 and I'll do a little, 4 and I'll do a capture because it's pretty exciting. So then we have that. Now, the next stage is the final stage for this. Well, it's kind of, there's two stages really here, which is that I want to also look at now how we get our contours out of it. And so let's do the contours. And for contours, what I want to do is actually undo that. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to create a layer called contours. Oh, did that work? Oh, we already had a layer called contours. So let's now create a new layer called proposed. And let's now move it as a sub layer underneath. And then for contours which were there, I'm going to basically, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to create one layer that I'm going to call total model, because it's made up of a whole lot of bits, right? And it's probably easier just to actually get copies of it. So let me turn off contours again. And then we're just going to get that, pressing and holding shift, that, spin around a bit, make sure we've got everything, and that. And then what I want to do is I want to copy it. I'm going to do it from the corner there to the corner there. And then I'm going to join. And so I should have now one poly surface. Yes. So I'm now going to move that onto the layer called total model. So at this point, I should now be able to turn off a lot of other stuff. Works boundary, banks. You see, if you turn off all of them at the master level, they all turn off. So platform fill, I don't even know if I'm using it. Topo surface, turn it off. You know, contours I'm going to leave on because I'm working with a platform. So that's now in a situation where I shouldn't, where, you know, well, I'm currently in there. So let me go to total model again and make that current. And then after that, I can then, you know, turn that off, and it should be just total model on. Now I'm going to go back to contours here, turn contours on, and I'm going to actually make a new sublayer under here that's called existing. And for existing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now turn off that. I'm now going to basically, I'm going to turn off total. I'm going to make existing the current layer. I'm going to turn off total model for the time being. And then I'm going to get all of these contours and I'm going to move them onto existing. Sad to make them lose their color. So let's give them, oof, geez, a lot of colors there. So then we use that. And so this is important because we have those existing ones. I'm now going to go to this layer called proposed, and I'm going to turn total model back on again. And the reason why this is important is that for us to be able to utilize existing contours and proposed contours and to show the difference, we need to actually have them link up together at their elevation. So what I'm going to I've now joined all of that. So I'm now going to use the contour command. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this object. It wants to know assign layers by, you know, current layer. That's good. Leave it as current layer. So I've said, you know, I've selected that total object. You know, now it wants to know what the base point is. And so this is where, you know, the base point is, I don't know where my object snaps are here, but, you know, this is where logically speaking, the base point is usefully at this end point of these contours. And then it wants to know the direction perpendicular. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to these planes here, because this is where it really needs me to show that upward is the Z direction. So that's how it works out. Perpendicular meaning that's the horizontal cut is perpendicular to that direction. So we go that way, and then it wants to know what the difference is. And I say 1, and then, you know, we get contours out of it. And so let's now turn off total model. And, you know, this is where we can now see how these contours are working in relation. Now, one thing that we want to do, and I might even do a little bit of another tutorial about this separately, so we can do this in stages, is how to actually get to work with this. And so, you know, essentially what we're doing and what the convention would be, we need to actually consult with Williams here. So let me, you know, go to Williams for a second. And so Williams would say, you know, everyone has a difference between whether or not you make the whole new proposed contours to be the whole contour where it's existing and onto proposed is dark and the dashed is the previous existing. I'm pretty sure that's what he would say. And so in that situation, what you're really looking at is, you can see how it's moving all the way here. What we're really trying to do is to create a kind of contour plan where we emphasize how those differences are changing. Now, this is where we might, for instance, you know, we can see here that there is a little bit of a fudge going on. And so what I would be doing for dealing with this, and this is because when we made a patch surface, we actually interpolated and generalized that surface. I could either try to trim things back here, or what I could do is I could actually go to topo surface when it says, you know, trimmed or patch. What I could do is I can turn that on again. You know, topo surfaces here, I can turn off trimmed and I can keep patched. What I can do is I can really, you know, in the same sort of way that we had previously, what I can do is I can turn off the total. I can really try to contour that thing itself. And so the way to logically do it is, we know that we've got these lowest contours here. You know, that's the layer called proposed there. And what we can do is we can really get the existing mesh and then contour it in the same way. So let's do that. And so we've got existing. What I'm going to do is create a new layer that I'm going to call patch. And so now I'm going to make that layer the current. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the existing, which I'm actually going to rename existing traced. And so what I've got this one, I'm going to turn off existing traced. I might even turn off proposed. And now what I actually need to keep proposed on, because we need these points here. And so what I'm really going to do now is I'm going to then say contour. I'm going to then select this object. Then it wants to know where the base point is. You know, logically speaking, you know, if this is one of the previous contours, that's a good one to work onto. It wants to know what the direction perpendicular is. Never use perspective for this. Always use a window that's got a direct perpendicular projection in it. And then, you know, it wants to know what the difference is between contours. It's 1. Let's do it and see what happens. And so now what we see is there's the existing. And if I turn off now, you know, I can see actually a few things there. So I turn off proposed, there's existing. Let's turn off also the patch surface. Then what we're really talking about is, where is it? Let's turn off that patch surface. there's the existing contours, and there is the proposed contours. Now, I'm also going to do something, which is I'm also going to create another one called, so this is the one that we're working on now. I'm going to actually create a new one under contours that I'm going to call existing projected. So here what I'm doing is I'm actually creating a planar plan. So I'm going to go onto that, make that current again, and I'm going to create another one of our favorite things, which is another one of these flat planes. I'm then going to create a planar surface on it again. And then what I'm going to do is I'm now going to project I'm going to project these contours here onto that surface. And so now you'll see if we look in the 3D, the projection missed. What? Let's undo that. So planar surface, that's it. That's fine. That's like, if we look at that, you can see that's pretty clear. So let's now project and say select curves to project. We're wanting to project onto that plane. Oh yeah, there we go. So you see that's now projected there. So I can turn off the patch contours, and I've got existing projected. Now I can create another layer that's called, that's basically called existing projected. This is now, we're going to call this one, create a new sublayer, and we're going to call this one proposed projected. So I'll make that one current as well, turn off existing projected, turn on proposed, create my plane again. Then what I'm going to do is I'm then going to, again, make a planar surface. And then I'm going to project all of this onto there. So again, we've now got both versions. So I turn off the proposed, and you'll see when I turn on existing projected, you know, we've got both of them on top of each other like that. And so, you know, I'll turn off, what is this? We don't need either of those planes. We just need these guys. And so what we can also see, which is interesting here, is you can see how there's actually, because of the grade and the interval, there is this, the swale is not entirely shown. And so this is where turning on the swale invert and editing the swale invert is a useful thing for us to do. And so this is the sort of starting point here where you know, we're now beginning to craft an image from this. And so really what we're going to do is we're also now going to then convert this into another drawing. And so what I'll do is I'm going to leave this recording there, and I'm going to then do another short recording about how to make a drawing from this. So it's a methodical process. It took me about an hour and 10 minutes. So it'll take you longer. But the difference is that once you complete this step, all of the coming things are going to be easier. So I hope you saw how, you know, that process worked, and how in actual fact, we're going to be able to utilize this process to undertake our works. And so, you know, as the French would say, bonne chance, and, you know, good luck.